Okay, welcome back. So today we're going through October-November 2020, question paper 13. So just like I do in other papers, a lot of the questions repeat themselves and have already been explained. So I will just circle those correct answers. If you want to see the full explanations for these questions, you can go to the question paper 11 video from 2020 October-November. So question 30 is one of them. So is question 26 and 25. So is 23 and 22. '17 and 16. '13 and 11. And question 10. Okay, so if you try those questions and you're stuck and you don't understand them, just go to the question paper 11 video for the full explanation of those questions. Okay, so we're starting at question 29. Many low-income countries rely on MNCs, big corporations, to provide economic development. What is a disadvantage for the low-income country? Okay, so let's start at the bottom. The MNCs have to pay taxes on their profit. For the low-income country, that's going to be an advantage, right? Because the multinational companies are likely to be making a lot of profit, so they may be able to boost the amount of taxes the low-income country can record. Balance of payments may improve. Again, that's another advantage, right? Maybe they have a significant deficit, and having the multinational company will allow them to increase their exports. So again, that's going to be an advantage. New production techniques are introduced. Once again, that's going to be another advantage. It's going to help us or help people within the country to become more productive if the multinational can bring their new ways of making goods and services to the country. So local firms close because MNCs are more efficient. That would be the disadvantage in this case. And if we think about it, the MNC comes into the country, they're very efficient, they've got these new production techniques, they've got a lot of cash reserves. So what they're going to be able to do is they're going to compete with local firms, and those local firms may not be able to compete with the MNCs, who are much bigger and much more efficient. So it might mean that some local businesses have to close. Okay, 28. What is most likely to discourage international specialization and trade? Okay, so we're basically looking for here what's going to stop us trading with other countries. Okay, so if we look at a decreasing labor supply, okay, that's not really going to affect our ability for international trade, is it? It might affect our ability to export for sure. It's not going to affect our ability to import. And if we can't make the products ourselves, we might just import them from other countries instead. Decreasing transport costs, that's actually going to help international specialization. We can get the goods to other countries quicker and cheaper than we could before. We're going to sell more goods to those countries hopefully then. Increasing oil prices, okay, that might have an effect, but it will be industry specific, and also that's not going to affect our ability to trade just because the oil prices have gone up. What will is if we have trade barriers. So for example, if we have restrictions on imports, if there's embargoes, if there's quotas, if there's tariffs, that will restrict our ability to export and import between countries. Trade barriers, remember, is something that makes it difficult to trade. So obviously that's going to be the most likely to discourage trade. Okay, question 27. For these type of questions, this is a difficult one because they normally don't ask these kind of style. But what would not be included in the current account balance of payments? Okay, so if I just go through these. Dividends earned from firms in other countries would. Rents paid to owners of land in another country, they also would. Where would they be recorded? They're going to be in either the primary or the secondary income, right? Remember, they take account of, for example, secondary income is gifts and international aid trade. So if we give money to another country for international aid, like Myanmar, like Syria, for example, and dividends and rent comes through in the primary income. So the dividends or the rent that we're paying in another country, that's again coming through in our primary income side. The imports of TVs from another country is also included because that would be our balance of trade in goods. But if we buy a house in another country, that's not included in our current account balance of payments because it doesn't match up with what we know about primary income, compensation of employees, and net transfer of property from abroad, net property income. Doesn't match up with secondary income, which is our, like we said, gifts or international aid. Doesn't match up with our export or import of goods or services, and it doesn't match up with our export or imports of goods. Okay, so 24. Very common question. You look through the papers, the videos I've made, you'll see this comes up all the time. You just have to learn what's included in HDI. And very simply, education level is included, the income per head is included, and the life expectancy is included. The level of savings is not included. Okay? They will always reference those three when they're talking about what's in HDI. And whatever's left over is always the one that's not included, which changes every time. So just be aware of that. Okay, we're going to 21, which is a very simple question. Now this question did not come up in question paper 11, but it has come up in previous years. I've seen this question about 3 or 4 times now. So, when do Italy's unemployment rate and GDP per head rise at the same time? Okay, so the correct answer here will be 2007-2008, because if we look here, we have a trend upwards, 2007-2008, and we have a trend upwards here for GDP per head as well. If we look at all the other years, 2000-2001, we're going down, but we're going up for GDP per head. So they're not both rising. 2009-2010, we're going up for unemployment, but we're going down for GDP per head. And 2014-2015, we're going up here, but we're coming down in GDP per head. Okay, question 20. Due to a rise in the number of retired people, there has been increased demand for some government expenditure. What type of government expenditure is most likely to be directly affected? Okay, so remember that this is common sense really. If there's more retired people, what kind of services are we going to have to spend our money on? Well, we're going to have to spend more money on pensions, but that's not offered to us, right? So forms of transfer payments. It's not really going to determine our ability to provide national defense like military services, etc. We also definitely don't need to retrain them because they're retired, so they're not going to be working. And again, street lighting is not really affected by just because there's more retired people, we need more street lighting. But what will definitely be needed is more health services. Common sense dictates the older we get, the more health problems we have. So the more health problems we have, the more health services that will need to be provided. Okay, 19. Which government policy measure would cause an increase in a country's supply of labour? Okay, so which one would allow us to have a larger workforce? That's our question here. If we increase unemployment benefits, what's that going to do? That's going to potentially decrease the country's supply of labour, because people will be getting more payments from the government, so they may choose not to work and just to receive the unemployment benefits instead. Raising income tax will do the exact same thing as A. Okay, it's going to disincentivize. So it's going to make people want to stop working and maybe go and receive the unemployment benefits instead. And lowering interest rate, we know that that affects spending and saving, not necessarily the supply of labour. But if we raise the age of retirement, that can allow us to increase the country's supply. Let's say we move from 18 to 60 in year 1, and then in year 2 we move our retirement age to 18 to 65. What's happening? We've now got people aged between 60 to 65 who can work, so the amount of labour we have available is going to go up. Okay, the government decreased the tax on all goods produced in a country. What is the most likely consequence of that? Okay, so they're decreasing a tax on the goods produced in a country. What are they doing? They're decreasing indirect taxes. So we're basically saying, what's the impact on this? Would it result in a decrease in exports? No. It's going to result in a possible increase in exports, because now it will be cheaper for us to sell the products, so people in other countries may want to buy more of them. If it increases our exports, it's definitely not going to increase our imports. It may decrease our imports, because people in our own country can now buy the same goods and services cheaper than from other countries. Okay, will it worsen the balance of trade? No, it will actually improve the balance of trade, because again we just explained that what it's going to do is it's going to increase our exports and decrease our imports. But it will, because our exports are going up, it may allow us to have an increase in production. It's now cheaper for firms to make these goods and services. So what happens? We know that when we remove an indirect tax, the supply curve shifts to the right. Okay, so if this is our original demand and supply, we remove the tax, supply goes to the right, we have a lower price and a larger quantity that's being traded. Okay, 15. What is considered to be an advantage to a firm when using the division of labour? Okay, this one's very straightforward. High labour turnover is not an advantage, that's a definite disadvantage. Movement of labour between tasks. Again, that's not really an advantage for the division of labour. Maybe if they said efficiency, or if they said production capability. Need for quality control, again, that would be like a kind of a disadvantage, because it's going to put additional time that the business needs to control the quality of their production. And at the same time, the division of labour is actually likely to allow us to make better quality products, because people will become more specialised in what they're able to make or what they're doing every day. But what it will do is it will allow for increased mechanization. Why is that? We know that capital is more productive than labour, and we know that the division of labour, it increases productivity. 14. What combination is usually found in a monopoly? Remember, a monopoly, one seller. Okay, it's the opposite of a competitive market. Many buyers and many sellers is a competitive market. Many buyers and a single seller, that would be correct. Single buyer and many sellers, well, I don't know how there'd be many sellers in a market where there's only one buyer. They wouldn't survive very long. And a single buyer and a single seller, no. Okay, so one seller but a lot of people to buy it. That's why they can make such high profits. So that's our monopoly. Okay, question 12. The table shows the total cost of firm X at each level of output. What level of output does TVC, total variable cost, exceed total fixed cost? Okay. First thing we need to do is we need to find our total fixed cost. And we always do that by going to where our output is 0. We can see our total cost is 3. So that means that our total fixed cost is 3. Okay? So all we need to do is we need to find the level of output where our total variable cost exceeds it. When we're making output of 1, our total variable cost has to be 2 because it's 5 minus 3, total cost minus total fixed cost. When our output is 6, when our total cost is 6 but our output is 2, our total variable cost will be 3. But we can see that our total variable cost will be 6 when we're at 3 units of output. Therefore, what level of output does total variable cost exceed total fixed cost? 3 units of output. Okay, question 9. I'm recording this just after we've done money. So, like I said to you before and in previous videos, you just have to learn the functions of money and the characteristics. Okay. Store of value, for example, here. Okay, that is a characteristic and function, but a bank deposit is not. Portability is also not a function we go through. Cash is an item, not a function or a characteristic. General acceptability, however, is our most important characteristic. It has to be generally acceptable as a form of money, and the medium of exchange is also the most important function that we studied. So the medium of exchange, we said that was where money is used or allows us to trade or to exchange for goods and for services. And then the seller that gets it will exchange it again for additional goods and services. Question 8. In which occupation would wages tend to increase? Okay. In those where workers paid weekly? No. That's not going to affect wages just because they're paid weekly instead of monthly. They may end up getting the same monthly wage anyway. In those where a worker needs less training? No. Why is that? They need less training. It's likely to be a low-skilled job. So it's unlikely that wages will tend to increase. In those where work becomes less dangerous? No. What we know is the more dangerous the work becomes, the more wages will increase because you've got less people wanting to do the job. But if there's excess demand for labour, that will allow wages to increase. And the reason is, if you think about it, remember the labour market is slightly different from our normal demand and supply. The demand for labour is the employers. So if the employers are having they want to fill a high amount of jobs, right? Then that means that the people who are applying for those jobs, they're needed by those employers. So those employers may be willing to offer them higher wages because they're demanding much more workers. They may be able to offer them higher wages to do so because they need them to increase their production. Okay, 7 is relatively straightforward. If you know your PED curves, you'll easily be able to answer this. Okay, we're told it's highly inelastic. Okay? Without even going through the rest of it, that's all we need. What's this? This is unitary for A. B is elastic. C is perfectly elastic. And D is our inelastic PED. We know by the shape of each of the curves. Okay? If you need to recap on all those different types of elasticities, go to the PED, PES chapters with revision notes and the Microsoft whiteboard images that had been sent. Diagram shows the demand curve for coffee in the US. Why did the quantity move from Q1 to Q2? Okay, this should again be very straightforward. Why did the quantity move? Quantity moved because the price changed. Okay, now how do we know it's about the price? Because we can see that it is an extension in demand. And an extension or a contraction in demand is only caused by a change in the price of the product itself. The product in this case is coffee. So any factor that would shift the demand curve would not be something that would cause the extension. That would cause a new demand curve. Therefore, incomes rose. That would move demand to the right, but it would be a shift. So that does not cause an extension. That would be a new curve like this one over here that we'll just label as D1. That's the same for C. Successful advertising would cause demand to go to the right as a shift. That looks like B, not D. Price of substitutes for coffee rose. Again, that would mean that less people would buy the substitutes, more people would buy coffee. Demand would shift to the right. Okay, so it has to be coffee became cheaper. What's a disadvantage of a market economic system? Advantages and disadvantages of market economic systems are very common questions again, right? Same type of question I've seen numerous occasions. Okay. Disadvantage, entrepreneurs lack incentives to provide what consumers want. That's false. The provision of incentives is actually a function of the price mechanism. So they are incentivized. Is a function of the price mechanism, and we know that it's the price mechanism that controls that market system. Government intervention is wrong because there will be no government intervention in a market system. Market dominance by firms can lead to higher prices. That's true. We know that a monopoly can develop in a market economic system. Okay, and that is one of our disadvantages. Even though in general it creates more choice, more competition and lower prices, it is possible that one firm is very successful and they're able to take over the market. And demerit goods are not underproduced, they're overproduced. Which would, if it said overproduced, then it would be a disadvantage of the market system. Okay, 4. Micro and macro, another common question that comes up every single year. So, for this one, very simple. Remember, microeconomics is a study and behavior of individuals, individual markets, individual firms, households, etc. Now what we see here is we're talking about the market for oil, right? So when the price of oil falls, there's an expansion in demand, and OPEC can influence the price of oil. Therefore, what are we looking at? We're looking at an individual market, so we're looking at a microeconomic concept for both. Question 3. Got a PPC curve. What's the opportunity cost? So what are we giving up moving from point X to produce only consumer goods? Okay, so we're here and we're going to move to here. Okay, what are we giving up? We're giving up all this area in here, aren't we? And all we have to do very simply is look at X. We know we're making more consumer goods, which means that we're going to make less capital goods. So capital goods is going to be our opportunity cost, right? So we can get rid of anything that's consumer goods, and we just see that we were making 70 and we're now making 0. So what's our opportunity cost? It's 70 units of capital goods. Okay, what's the key role of an entrepreneur? Again, very simple, risk taker. How do we know it's a risk taker? It's in the definition of an entrepreneur. Somebody who takes significant risks in order to achieve significant financial rewards. Shareholder is not an entrepreneur. A worker is part of the factor of production, labour. And an inventor may be an entrepreneur, but it's not their key role. They don't have to invent something, but they do have to take risks. They could just improve on something, for example, not necessarily invent something. But even somebody who's improving something would still have to take risks in order to set up their business. Okay, and last one, again, very simple, is always, or in general, is a basic economic problem question. And in previous videos, if you've watched them, you'd see I put the same thing down every time. Limited resources, unlimited wants, scarcity, choice, opportunity cost. So why do consumers have to make choices? Because their wants cannot be satisfied with their income. Limited resources, unlimited wants, choice. Okay, so all the others don't apply in this case. Basic economic problem. Those 5 things I've mentioned, if you just learn them, you'll get all these questions right. Okay, thanks for listening.